Uh-oh, everybody. Looks like indies have been embarrassing the big corpo studios just a little bit too much. It's time to put them in their place. When this story first broke, I mostly ignored it from the few headlines I'd seen. I thought it sounded so ridiculous, so utterly insane, there was no way it was actually true or would really happen if it was. Silly me, I suppose at this point I should know better than to assume I know the limits of these horrifying vulturous corpo parasites. If there's any art left that you love, any art left anywhere in the world, rest assured it will eventually be ruined for the sake of capital maxing. Unity, it seems, is no different. But, alright, let's back up. What the hell am I talking about? So if you haven't heard, don't worry, like I said, I almost totally ignored this story too, just for how it ranked on the absurdity meter. But 2 days ago, Unity, the platform upon which countless games are built, the vast majority of indie games certainly, kept things real low-key as they pushed an update to their licensing plan. Nothing crazy about that so far, right? Unity has been a juggernaut in the game dev and specifically the indie game dev world for years now. They must update their policies all the time, right? Well, yes and no. While they do push updates to their policies frequently, as any company that relies on licensing models does, this time things were just a bit different. This time they snuck in a brand new fee that will apply anytime a game using the Unity runtime, which is a required element of any game that was built with Unity, is downloaded by an end user, meaning customers. Well, what the fuck does that mean? It means that they're going to try to charge the publisher, developer, distributor, whoever, a fee every time a game built in Unity is installed. Currently, Unity games operate on a revenue share and licensing model similar to Unreal Engine, where after the first million or so sold, Epic takes 5%, etc., stuff like that. But now, Unity wants to start charging publishers every time a game is installed after a threshold of 200,000. Not purchased, installed. They want to charge every time a game is installed. As in, let me delete this game because I'm running low on storage, but now it's 5 months later and I want to play it again, so I'm going to reinstall it. Or maybe I installed it on my PC and then on my Steam Deck. They get charged twice for that under this new plan. Absolutely psychotic. And starting January 1st, it's retroactive. So come Jan 1st, all of a sudden, tons of indie devs, many without a surplus of funds, mind you, that already planned and budgeted on a super thin margin before any of this nonsense, might already have a big fucking bill waiting for them from Unity. Can you see the problems here? Because this shit is fucking crazy. Unity is essentially just trying to justify extortion, and the majority of companies affected likely aren't financially equipped to push back on it. And if the first thing that you're thinking is that many indie devs might not even be able to afford to have literally any involvement in this horror show going forward and might just delist their games as a result, well, you would be correct. It's already happening. Cult of the Lamb dev already announced it's going to be gone January 1st. Among Us programmer Forrest Willard stated that pulling their game is on the table and more. And this is just the start. This dude paints a picture of what could likely be a very common scenario if this disaster clusterfuck is allowed to continue. He says, imagine a dev selling a freemium game that makes $200,000 from in-app purchases after being installed 2.8 million times. 2.8 million installs at 20 cents per install means all of a sudden they would owe Unity $560,000, which is over $300,000 more than they even earned in the first place. And that's just one example. How they imagine this to be sustainable is fucking beyond me. And what about services like Game Pass? Potentially millions of installs that previously you would have paid a set licensing for now could end up costing you, the publisher, distributor, millions more than they might have budgeted for. Or what about games that were just free? Developer Over the Moon Games here mentions how their free game was installed over 7 million times, and if this goes forward, they would then owe Unity more money than they've ever made in their entire life. And that's not even touching the piracy aspect of it. Now, as many of you know, I've long been an advocate for pirating pretty much fucking anything you can get your hands on because, well, fuck corpos, with the exception, obviously, of games from smaller and indie studios that could realistically use your support. But now, with this new licensing plan, people could actually fuck with devs from a monetary standpoint in reverse. Maybe we can say goodbye to review bombing because, shit, who needs posts on the internet when you can just reinstall and delete a game you don't like for weeks on end with a script across 500 virtual machines? It's actually kind of a tempting thought until you realize that the only devs that you could affect by doing that are likely the small indie ones who can't afford to use anything other than Unity, and then it just becomes horrifying and sick. Smartly, many other companies in the same business as Unity took the opportunity for free positive press to announce simply that they would not be doing what Unity is doing.
Thanks for the free parking.
So yes, the entire industry, or at least the non-corpo part of the industry, is in a panic. There's even talk of a possible class action lawsuit being filed against them. And I get it, I hope they do. In the indie dev scene, Unity essentially holds all the cards, and they're doing what any corpo does when they hold all the cards. Changing the rules arbitrarily to benefit only themselves and fuck everyone else over. So, what happened? Did Unity get bought out? No, nothing so dramatic. Their CEO is just a sociopath, as you'll see in a moment. This announcement was predictably followed up with a bunch of corpo doublespeak, weak attempts to clarify or hedge, and otherwise downplay the severity of the backlash, of course. But when you consider that the current CEO of Unity is actually John Riccitiello, the same guy who just so happened to be the CEO of EA when they earned the Worst Company in America award, and that he and a bunch of his other C-suite bootlickers sold off a bunch of stock prior to this announcement going public, it's hard to see it as anything other than a cynical attempt to fuck indies into the ground and make as much money as possible off their corpses as they're being buried. And believe it or not, that's actually not even the worst of it. Fortunately though, the worst is also why, after researching this story, I ultimately think it's probably all going to be walked back. So, while watching this video, or maybe as you were reading articles about the story, seeing it covered elsewhere, you may have found yourself thinking, alright, they're going to charge per install, but how the fuck are they going to keep track of every time a game is installed? It's a very good question, especially since Unity does not come with any sort of DRM or product tracking software that phones home to some manner of central server to check in and register with a master database every time its runtime is deployed or installed. How are they going to deal with that, since the crux of this entire endeavor seems hinged on counting installs? Are you ready? They're gonna guess. That's right, they're going to fucking guess using nothing more than non-transparent aggregate data, which, as you can probably imagine, doesn't stand a chance of being very accurate. And fortunately, it seems like many have noticed that, with this tweet from Mike Bithell doing a good job of summing everything up. Given that their model legally cannot be collecting real user data, it amounts to a guess. A guess they are refusing to break down to those they're hoping to bill. Walk back imminent, but it reveals a lot. Yes, he's exactly right, it does reveal a lot. As egregious, dystopian, rapacious, and nightmarish as this is, there is simply no shot that companies are going to allow themselves to be potentially bankrupted by guessed install numbers. Now, if the fallout from this whole disaster was going to be isolated to only indies and smaller developers, I would still be worried. But remember, it's also the distributor that has to shoulder the fees in some instances, like subscriptions, such as Xbox Game Pass, for example. You think Microsoft is going to tolerate suddenly being tossed a multi-million-dollar bill for every single Unity game they list on Game Pass? No. Fuck no. No shot that's going to fly. They might have been able to bully or blackmail smaller companies, but the big corpos that are affected by this are not going to put up with it. And what's really weird is that all this seems kinda, I don't know, obvious? This is a question that we actually find ourselves asking around here pretty often. If regular idiots like us can see the glaring flaws and issues with so many decisions these corpos make, then why are they made? Certainly there are armies of corpo MBAs and lawyers and market analysts would have seen this coming, right? Well, apparently in this case, they did. And no one cared, because, well, fuck everybody, make money, obviously. Now, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say this is definitely an attempt to put indies in their place after the recent massive success of many games developed by smaller studios shamed the living fuck out of lots of AAA devs, but it does seem like a really good way to do that and make an ungodly amount of money in the process, especially when you remember that the CEO behind this is the same dude who wanted to sell you bullets in Battlefield and who had to put out a public apology for calling devs who push back against monetization fucking idiots, quote unquote. So while I wouldn't put motivations that wholly evil past them, it is likely that this is just more the slow burn strategy at work that we've been seeing for years. Announce something crazy, then walk it back, but not completely. That way you make the compromise seem more reasonable. Then the Overton window gets shifted just a little bit more in the corpo's favor. Keep that up across many years, and before you know it, you have customers accepting crazy, sick shit like microtransactions and defending cosmetics while shoveling money at companies like Activision Blizzard for stuff that used to just be part of the game. And it looks like they're at it again. if they ever really stopped. And this time their target, conveniently enough, is that one area of the market where their modern-day vulturous monetization tactics haven't taken hold. Yet. They're at it again, guys. Everybody better look the fuck out.
Yup, woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Huh? Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down. Back down. What? Yup, woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out.